Imagine for a moment that you are about to receive the greatest gift humanity can ever receive, the Eucharist, a moment of direct communion with God, pure grace, infinite love. But what if I told you that there are attitudes, thoughts, and sins that can prevent you from receiving this gift fully? Many of us approach the altar without realizing we are carrying burdens that stain our souls, things that seem small, almost insignificant, but in the presence of God become barriers that separate us from true communion. Today, you will discover something that few dare to speak about: the 12 sins you must confess before receiving the Eucharist, explained clearly and directly. This is not just a warning, it is an opportunity, a chance to cleanse your soul, to approach God with purity and reverence, and to transform the way you live your faith every day. Before we begin, I want to extend a special invitation. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, click subscribe now and turn on notifications. Here, we share deep reflections, spiritual teachings, and guidance to help you live your faith with awareness and love. Don't miss any content that could change your life. Now take a deep breath, open your heart and mind. What you are about to hear can transform your relationship with God and the Eucharist forever. In the next few minutes, we will explore each of these sins carefully, with reflection and practical examples. You will understand why they are so important, how to recognize them in your own life, and how sincere confession can free your soul. Now that we have set the stage, let's begin with the first 4 sins that Saint Faustina warns must be confessed before receiving the Eucharist. These sins, if left unconfessed, can block the grace and deep spiritual connection you receive during communion. 1. The sin of hatred or resentment. One of the most dangerous sins we often carry is hatred or unresolved resentment. You might think it's harmless to hold a grudge against someone who hurt you, but this anger builds walls around your heart. Approaching the Eucharist with a soul burdened by hatred prevents you from fully receiving God's love. Think about it. Can love truly enter a heart that refuses to forgive? Confession is the key to releasing these chains, allowing your heart to be open, humble, and receptive to God's grace. 2. The sin of pride. Pride is often invisible, yet it can be one of the most destructive sins. It comes in many forms: thinking we are better than others, refusing to acknowledge our faults, or relying on our own strength rather than God's. When we carry pride into the confessional or to the altar, we limit God's work in our lives. Remember, the Eucharist is a humble gift. To receive it fully, we must first humble ourselves, acknowledging that we are dependent on God's mercy and love. 3. The sin of envy. Envy, the silent thief of joy, can quietly poison our hearts. It is the feeling of jealousy toward others' blessings, success, or happiness. This sin makes it difficult to celebrate the good in others and can even lead to bitterness and secret anger. Confessing envy allows you to release these feelings and cultivate gratitude. Only a grateful heart can fully embrace the Eucharist with pure joy and openness. 4. The sin of impurity. Impurity is a broad term that includes thoughts, actions, and intentions that dishonor the body and soul. It can manifest as lustful thoughts, inappropriate behaviors, or even indulgence in harmful media. This sin not only affects your relationship with others, but also your relationship with God. Before receiving the Eucharist, it is essential to confess and seek purification from any form of impurity, so that your body and soul are aligned with the sacredness of this holy sacrament. Each of these first 4 sins touches a different aspect of our hearts, our emotions, our thoughts, our desires. Recognizing and confessing them is not a punishment. It is a liberation. Imagine the peace that comes when your soul is unburdened, ready to receive God's love fully and freely. In the next block, we will continue with the next 4 sins, diving deeper into the spiritual barriers they create and how confession can transform your experience of the Eucharist. As we continue our journey into St. Faustina's guidance, we now turn to the next 4 sins that must be confessed to fully receive the Eucharist. These sins often hide in our daily habits and thoughts, quietly separating us from God's grace. 5. The sin of deceit or dishonesty. Deceit includes lying, manipulating, or presenting a false image to others. Even small lies can accumulate in the soul, creating distance between you and God. When we approach the Eucharist with deceit in our hearts, we fail to present ourselves as we truly are, uniting our imperfections with God's mercy. Confession cleanses this dishonesty, allowing you to step into the sacrament with authenticity, humility, and integrity. 6. The sin of neglecting God's commandments. This sin may not always seem dramatic, but ignoring God's commandments weakens the soul. Perhaps it's failing to honor the Sabbath, neglecting prayer, or choosing selfish actions over love and charity. When we ignore God's guidance, we inadvertently close our hearts to the Eucharist. Acknowledging and confessing this sin restores our alignment with God's will and opens our hearts to His presence. 7. The sin of hatred toward oneself. It may sound surprising, but self-hatred is a serious spiritual obstacle. Believing you are unworthy, despising your own life, or engaging in harmful self-talk can prevent you from embracing God's love. Confession teaches us that we are God's creation, loved beyond measure. By releasing self-hatred, you invite divine grace to heal your wounds and strengthen your soul as you approach the Eucharist. 8. The sin of anger or uncontrolled temper. Anger in itself is not always sinful, but uncontrolled, persistent anger can corrupt the soul. It leads to resentment, harsh words, and broken relationships. Bringing anger into the Eucharist clouds your heart, preventing the full experience of God's peace. Through confession, you can confront and release this anger, replacing it with patience, understanding, and a renewed capacity for love. These next 4 sins remind us that the state of our heart matters just as much as our outward actions. The Eucharist is a sacred encounter with God, and He invites us to prepare ourselves with honesty, humility, and love. In the next block, we will reveal the final 4 sins, which are crucial for ensuring that your soul is fully ready to receive the Eucharist and experience the divine grace in its fullness. Now we arrive at the final 4 sins that St. Faustina emphasizes as essential to confess before receiving the Eucharist. These sins often strike at the core of our relationship with God, others, and ourselves. 9. The sin of greed or covetousness. Greed is more than just wanting material possessions. It is an attachment that can control our hearts. When we prioritize wealth, power, or status over our spiritual life, we distance ourselves from God's grace. Approaching the Eucharist with greed in our hearts prevents us from fully surrendering to God's love. Confession frees you from these attachments, helping you embrace generosity, gratitude, and a heart open to God's abundant blessings. 10. The sin of gossip or slander. Words carry power, and gossip or slander can poison the soul. Speaking ill of others, spreading rumors, or judging in a harmful way builds walls of negativity that separate us from divine communion. Through confession, you cleanse your speech and thoughts, cultivating love, respect, and a spirit of reconciliation. Only a pure heart can fully receive the Eucharist. 11. The sin of neglecting the sick and needy. St. Faustina reminds us that ignoring those in need is a serious spiritual failing. Our actions toward others reflect our love for God. Turning away from the suffering of the sick, the poor, or the marginalized dims the light of charity in our souls. Confessing this sin awakens compassion and mercy, aligning our hearts with God's command to love one another. It opens the soul to the fullness of Eucharistic grace. 12. The sin of doubting. God's mercy or love. Finally, doubt itself can be a barrier. Questioning God's mercy, feeling unworthy, or distrusting His love creates spiritual distance. The Eucharist is a profound encounter with God's infinite love and forgiveness, but doubt can cloud our perception and prevent us from experiencing its full depth. Confession allows us to surrender our doubts, embrace faith, and receive the Eucharist with trust and confidence in God's unwavering love. These 12 sins, when confessed sincerely, release the soul from obstacles that limit divine grace. They are not meant to shame, but to guide, offering a path to spiritual freedom, renewal, and a closer relationship with God. As you reflect on these sins, ask yourself, which of these do I carry in my heart? Confession is the bridge that transforms our weaknesses into opportunities for grace, making each encounter with the Eucharist a moment of true spiritual nourishment. Now that we have explored the 12 sins, St. Faustina emphasizes, it's time to move from understanding to action. Knowledge alone does not prepare the soul. Preparation and reflection are essential to approach the Eucharist with purity, humility, and reverence. Step 1. Examine your conscience. Thoroughly before confession, take time for deep self-reflection. This is not a superficial checklist, but a sincere look into your thoughts, actions, and intentions. Ask yourself, have I harbored hatred or resentment? Have I acted with pride or envy? Have I neglected God or others in my daily life? Be honest with yourself. The goal is not guilt, but awareness. Honest self-examination opens the door to true repentance and spiritual renewal. Step 2. Approach confession with humility. Confession is a gift, not a burden. Approach the sacrament knowing that God desires to forgive you, to cleanse your soul, and to restore you. Humility is the key. Acknowledge your imperfections without excuses or rationalizations. Speak sincerely from the heart and embrace the grace being offered. Step 3. Reflect on each sin personally. Take each of the 12 sins and consider how it manifests in your life. For example, if you struggle with anger, identify situations where it arises and how it affects your relationships. If pride is a challenge, notice moments of self-centeredness or refusal to ask for help. If envy or greed appears, examine how it influences your thoughts and actions toward others. Reflection transforms awareness into actionable steps toward purification. Step 4. Cultivate a spirit of repentance and renewal. Repentance is not just saying I'm sorry, but a commitment to change. Visualize leaving the confessional lighter, free from the spiritual burdens you carried. Imagine walking to the altar with a heart ready to receive God's love fully, without obstacles. Step 5. Pray for strength and guidance. Prayer before confession, and the Eucharist strengthens your soul. Ask God to reveal hidden sins, guide your heart, and fill you with courage to confess fully. Prayer aligns your mind, heart, and spirit with the sacred act you are about to perform. Step 6. Embrace gratitude and reverence. Finally, cultivate gratitude for the opportunity to receive the Eucharist. Approach with awe and reverence, recognizing it as a moment of intimate union with God. Let gratitude transform every step of the preparation, from reflection to confession, to the act of receiving the sacrament. By following these steps, your soul is not only ready to receive the Eucharist, but also open to the profound spiritual transformation it brings. Confession is the bridge, preparation is the path, and the Eucharist is the ultimate encounter with divine grace. In the next block, we will explore how to maintain this spiritual state after confession and Eucharist, ensuring that the grace you receive continues to enrich your life daily. Receiving the Eucharist and making a sincere confession are powerful steps toward spiritual renewal, but the journey does not end there. Maintaining the grace and purity you've gained is essential for deepening your relationship with God and living a faith-filled life. 1. Continue daily reflection. Even after confession, take time each day to examine your thoughts, words, and actions. Daily reflection is like spiritual maintenance. It helps you recognize small sins before they grow into habits that distance you from God. Consider asking yourself questions like, did I respond with love or anger today? Did I act with humility or pride? Did I extend forgiveness where it was needed? Regular reflection keeps your conscience alert and your heart aligned with God's will. 2. Strengthen your prayer life. Prayer is the lifeline of your spiritual journey. After receiving the Eucharist, commit to daily prayer, thanking God for His mercy, asking for guidance, and seeking strength to live virtuously. Prayer is not just words. It is a conversation with God that sustains the grace you received in confession. 3. Practice forgiveness and compassion. One of the most effective ways to maintain grace is by forgiving others and showing compassion. Remember the sins we discussed: hatred, resentment, and neglect of others' needs. Actively choosing forgiveness and kindness allows the grace from confession and the Eucharist to flow through your life. 4. Avoid temptations and harmful habits. After cleansing your soul, it's crucial to recognize and avoid recurring temptations that could pull you back into sin. This could mean distancing yourself from toxic relationships, controlling your anger, or resisting indulgences that harm your spiritual growth. Proactively avoiding sin keeps your heart pure and receptive to God's love. 5. Share God's love in action. Grace multiplies when shared. Live your faith through acts of love, charity, and service. Help the needy, support the sick, and encourage others in their spiritual journeys. These actions reinforce the transformation you experience during confession and Eucharist, making your spiritual life active and vibrant. 6. Remain humble and open. Spiritual growth is a lifelong process. After confession and Eucharist, remain humble, acknowledging that perfection is a journey, not a destination. Stay open to God's guidance, ready to confront weaknesses and willing to seek forgiveness whenever needed. 7. Embrace gratitude and joy. Finally, cultivate a heart of gratitude and joy. Recognize the gift of God's mercy and love in your life. Celebrate the moments of grace and let this gratitude deepen your desire to live faithfully. A joyful, thankful heart attracts divine grace continuously. By following these practices, you transform confession and Eucharist from isolated events into lifelong opportunities for spiritual growth. Your soul remains free from the burdens of sin, open to God's love, and empowered to live a life of faith, hope, and charity. In the next block, we will discuss the deeper spiritual meaning of each sin and how truly understanding them can transform your life, creating a permanent shift in your relationship with God. We have journeyed together through the 12 sins that St. Faustina warns us to confess before receiving the Eucharist. Now, let's take a moment to reflect on their deeper spiritual meaning and how understanding them can truly transform your life. Each sin is more than an act or thought. It is a barrier between your soul and the infinite love of God. Hatred and resentment block forgiveness. Pride and envy distort our perception of others and ourselves. Impurity, deceit, and neglect of God's commandments create distance from holiness. Anger, self-hatred, and neglect of the needy erode the compassion that God desires in our hearts. Greed and gossip distort our values and relationships, while doubt weakens our faith in divine mercy. By recognizing these sins, we gain the power to change. Confession is not punishment, it is liberation. It is an invitation to let go of everything that holds us back and to step into the fullness of God's love. When you approach the Eucharist with a clean heart, free from these 12 obstacles, you experience more than a ritual. You encounter God's grace in its purest form. You feel renewed, strengthened, and connected to a divine love that transforms every aspect of your life. Key takeaways. Awareness is the first step. Know the sins that may be affecting your soul. Confession is the bridge. It opens the way for God's forgiveness and grace. Preparation is essential. Self-reflection, prayer, and humility prepare your heart. Maintenance is ongoing. Daily reflection, acts of love, and gratitude keep your soul aligned with God. Transformation is possible. Each step brings you closer to living a life of faith, purity, and divine connection. As you reflect on these 12 sins, ask yourself, which of them do I carry in my life? Where can I seek God's mercy more sincerely? Where can I act with more love, humility, and compassion? Remember, the Eucharist is not just a gift, it is an encounter that heals, strengthens, and transforms. Approach it with a humble heart, confess sincerely, and embrace the grace that awaits. Before we finish, I want to remind you of the invitation I mentioned at the beginning. If you haven't yet, click subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we share reflections, spiritual teachings, and guidance to help you grow in faith and live a life aligned with God's love. Don't miss the opportunity to enrich your spiritual journey every day. Thank you for taking this journey today. Reflect on these truths, prepare your heart, and approach the Eucharist with the awareness and devotion it deserves. May your soul be renewed, your faith strengthened, and your life transformed by the infinite mercy and love of God.